The towering Galactic Council chamber hummed with the murmurs of a dozen species, their voices blending into a discordant symphony of clicks, whistles, and guttural growls. The domed ceiling shimmered with holographic projections of star maps and fleet deployments, casting shifting patterns of light across the assembled delegates. Commander Elias Vance stood at the center of it all, his black and gold Earth Federation uniform stark against the riot of alien colors. His boots were planted firmly on the polished alloy floor, his back straight, his face unreadable. Around him, bioluminescent patterns flickered across scaled hides and chitinous plates as the delegates exchanged knowing glances. High Strategist Krell of the Vorak Dominion rose from his elevated platform, his segmented limbs unfolding with practiced grace. His mandibles twitched in what humans had learned was the equivalent of a smirk. "The Galactic Strategic Planning Committee has reached a decision," he announced, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "After careful consideration of recent incidents involving human fleet operations, new safety restrictions will be implemented immediately." A ripple of amusement passed through the assembled delegates. The Zeperian contingent, their feathery crests bobbing, exchanged what could only be described as smug looks. The Seralex delegates, their bulbous heads pulsing with faint telepathic energy, remained still, but their disdain was palpable. Vance's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. What incidents would those be, High Strategist? Krell's antennae twitched. "Need I remind you of Proxima, your so-called tactical withdrawal that nearly destabilized an entire star system, or the Battle of Cygnus, where your reckless maneuvers caused collateral damage to 3 neutral outposts?" He spread his forelimbs in a gesture that was anything but conciliatory. "Your species is impulsive, unpredictable. The Federation cannot risk another incident like Proxima." A murmur of agreement rose from the assembled delegates. The Tarkesh ambassador, a hulking mass of muscle and scar tissue, grunted his approval. The delicate crystalline lumen delegates chimed in with harmonic tones that somehow managed to sound condescending. Vance took a measured breath. "With all due respect, High Strategist, those incidents were the result of lack of discipline," Krell interrupted. "Your fleets operate without regard for established protocols. Your commanders make decisions in the heat of the moment, without consulting the broader strategic picture." He tapped a clawed appendage against the podium. "Effective immediately, all human fleet movements must be submitted to the Strategic Planning Committee for approval. Battle plans, patrol routes, even supply convoys. Nothing leaves human space without Federation oversight." The chamber erupted in a chorus of approval. Vance felt the weight of 100 alien eyes on him, their gazes ranging from pity to outright mockery. The Zeperian delegate, a tactician named Vrix, leaned over to whisper something to his aide. The resulting chittering laughter needed no translation. Vance waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "And if we refuse?" Krell's bioluminescent patterns flared a deep, satisfied purple. "Then Earth will be removed from the Federation's Mutual Defense Pact. Your colonies will be left unprotected. Your trade routes will be revoked." He leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes glinting. "You don't want to stand alone in this galaxy, Commander. Not with what is out there." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Everyone knew what or who Krell was referring to. The Devourers, the ancient scourge that had nearly wiped out the Vorak millennia ago. The boogeyman the Federation trotted out whenever a member species needed reminding of their place. Vance's comm unit buzzed silently against his wrist. A message from Earth Command, no doubt. He didn't need to read it to know what it said. Comply for now. He straightened his uniform and met Krell's gaze. "Earth will adhere to the committee's decision," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "But I suggest you consider the consequences of treating an allied species like a liability." Krell's mandibles twitched again. "How very human of you to threaten us with your cooperation." He turned to the assembled delegates. "This session is adjourned. The restrictions go into effect at dawn Cententrum time. As the delegates began to disperse, Vance caught snippets of conversation, whispered jokes about human recklessness, derisive comments about Earth's primitive tactics. A Serelex delegate floated past him, its telepathic voice dripping with condescension. "Perhaps now they'll learn their place," it murmured to its companion. Vance didn't react. He'd been in the service long enough to know when to pick his battles. This wasn't the time for defiance. Not here, not in front of the entire Federation. But as he turned to leave, he allowed himself a small private smile. They'd made a mistake. A big one. Because humanity had never fought better than when it was cornered. The officers' lounge aboard the USN Defiance hummed with the low chatter of a dozen species. Glasses of luminescent Zephyrian wine cast shifting blue shadows across the polished alloy walls. Lieutenant Mara Cole tightened her grip on her coffee mug as she passed a cluster of Serelex officers, their bulbous cranial membranes pulsing with amusement. Their telepathic laughter prickled at the edges of her mind like static. "Another glorious day babysitting the primates," one Serelex murmured, his four-fingered hand swirling a drink that glowed like molten gold. His companion's membrane flashed violet, the equivalent of a smirk. At least they gave them pretty ships to polish. Keeps their simple minds occupied. Mara's knuckles whitened around her mug. She forced herself to keep walking. 3 weeks since the Council's decree, and the mockery hadn't stopped. Not in the corridors, not in the mess hall, and certainly not here in the one place officers were supposed to unwind. She slid into an empty booth near the observation windows, where the swirling colors of the Antares Nebula painted the stars in hues no human eye had names for. The table's surface flickered to life, projecting the latest news feeds from Cententrum Prime. A Vorak analyst filled the screen, his chitinous faceplates shifting in what passed for amusement among his kind. "And let's be honest," the analyst was saying, mandibles clicking, human tactics at Proxima were barely above caveman logic, charging a fortified position with inferior numbers. Only a species with no instinct for self-preservation. Mara stabbed the mute button. The silence that followed was broken by a snort from the next booth over. Commander Elias Vance sat alone, his black and gold uniform pristine, despite the 12-horse shift he'd just pulled. His eyes never left the tactical display floating above his whiskey glass. "They're not wrong about Proxima," Mara said before she could stop herself. Vance didn't look up. "No, Lieutenant, they're not." The holographic ships above his drink shifted formation, but they're missing the point. Across the lounge, a group of Zephyrian tacticians erupted in laughter. One of them, a tall female with iridescent scales, was pantomiming what looked like a human flailing in 0G. Her companion's gill slits flared with amusement. Mara's tablet chimed. A priority message from Earth Command scrolled across the screen. Compliance Protocol Alpha, Faye enacted. All fleet movements to be submitted for Council approval, effective immediately. She exhaled through her nose. They're really going through with it. Vance finally looked up. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course they are. The Federation loves rules, loves order. He tapped his display, and the holographic ships dissolved into a star map, right up until the moment they need someone to break them. A fresh wave of laughter drew their attention. The Serelex officers had been joined by a Vorak logistics officer, his carapace gleaming under the lounge lights. "No, seriously," the Vorak was saying, claws clicking against his glass. "They gave their newest dreadnought a human captain. Blake, I think. Poor bastard probably thinks flanking means hugging the wall during a firefight." Mara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the deck. Vance caught her wrist. "Don't. They can't just, they can, and they will." Vance's grip was firm. Right now, they want a reaction. They want to prove we're as emotional as they think we are. He released her and tapped his temple. "Remember the lesson, Lieutenant. Predators always pounce when they scent blood." The lounge doors hissed open, and a hush fell over the room. Captain Ryan Blake strode in, his flight jacket hanging open over a grease-stained jumpsuit. He ignored the staring aliens and made straight for the coffee dispenser. The Sarlacc who'd spoken earlier leaned toward his companions. "Watch this," he murmured, loud enough for half the lounge to hear. "I bet he tries to drink it without vaporizing his esophagus again." Blake filled his mug to the brim with black coffee. He took a long, deliberate sip. Then he turned and locked eyes with the Sarlacc. "You know," he said conversationally, "for a species that prides itself on telepathy, you're remarkably bad at knowing when to shut the hell up." The lounge went dead silent. Blake took another sip. "See, here is the thing about humans, friend. We've got this saying, speak softly and carry a big stick." He set his mug down with a click. "Problem is you. Aliens only ever notice the stick after it has broken your nose." The Sarlacc's cranial membrane flushed crimson before he could respond. The ship-wide comm crackled to life. "All senior officers to the bridge," came the clipped voice of the Defiance's AI. "Priority alert. Repeat. All senior officers to the bridge immediately." Blake drained his coffee in one gulp. As he passed the Sarlacc's table, he paused. "Oh, and friend." He smiled. "That saying I mentioned, turns out we left out the best part." He leaned in close. "Sometimes, we like to let you think we're the ones holding the stick." The bridge doors sealed behind him, leaving the lounge in stunned silence. Mara realized she was grinning. Vance just shook his head and stood, gathering his tablet. "Come on, Lieutenant. Sounds like the galaxy's about to learn why you never back a human into a corner." As they left, Mara glanced back. The Sarlacc officers were still staring at the spot where Blake had stood, their membranes flickering uncertainly. For the first time in weeks, the lounge felt different. Not calmer, but the laughter had changed. It wasn't aimed at humans anymore. It was nervous. The wargame arena stretched endlessly, a void of swirling nebula gas and scattered asteroid fields. Holographic projectors hummed to life, painting the darkness with hundreds of ships, human and alien fleets squaring off in the Federation's grandest tactical exercise. Observation decks ringed the simulated battlefield, packed with alien tacticians and high-ranking officers. Their many eyes tracked the formations, their confidence radiating like the glow of their bioluminescent markings. Captain Ryan Blake stood on the bridge of the USN Stormbringer, his fingers tapping impatiently against the command console. The Vorak design scenario blinked across his screen. Outdated Terran weaponry, reduced shield capacity, and a simulated Zephyrian armada boasting superior numbers and firepower. The parameters were clear. Humans were expected to lose. Badly. "Captain," Lieutenant Cho muttered from the tactical station. "They've given us antique railguns and half-charged engines. This isn't a test, it is a slaughter." Blake smirked. "Then let's make it their slaughter." In the observation deck, High Strategist Krell folded his chitinous arms, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. Beside him, a Sarlacc officer pulsed blue with amusement. "They won't last 5 minutes," the Sarlacc whispered. "Human tactics are too rigid, too predictable." The simulation began with a blaring horn. The Zephyrian fleet surged forward, their sleek cruisers weaving through the asteroids with practiced precision. Energy cannons glowed as they locked onto the human ships. "Evasive pattern Delta," Blake barked. The Stormbringer banked hard, narrowly avoiding the first volley across the formation. Other Terran ships followed suit, but not in the pre-approved maneuvers the Federation had demanded. "Captain, we're deviating from the battle plan." Ensign Rivera called out, her voice tight. "Damn right we are," Blake said. "Helm, take us into the asteroid field full burn." The Stormbringer shot forward, skimming so close to a tumbling rock that the shields sparked. The Zephyrian pursuers hesitated. Their doctrine forbade such reckless navigation. "Now, Cho, fire the railguns. but not at their ships, hit the asteroids. The lieutenant's eyes widened. "Sir, do it." The railguns thundered, sending superheated slugs into the nearest asteroids. The impact sent the massive rocks careening straight into the path of the Zephyrian formation. 2 cruisers vanished in flashes of light as the debris tore through them. In the observation deck, Krell's bioluminescence flickered red. What is this?" "They're not following the exercise parameters." "On the Stormbringer," Blake grinned. "All right, listen up. We're not fighting their war, we're fighting ours." He opened a fleet. Wide channel. "All ships, reroute auxiliary power to experimental thrusters. We're going dark." Across the human fleet, engines flared with unapproved modifications. The Terran ships shot forward, not in formation, but in a chaotic, scattered rush, straight into the heart of the nebula. The Zephyrian commander's voice crackled over comms. "Human vessels, you are violating simulation protocol. Return to designated engagement zones immediately." Blake leaned back in his chair. "Negative, we're busy winning." The nebula's radiation should have blinded sensors. Standard doctrine said to avoid it, but the human ships didn't just enter it, they used it. Shields were recalibrated to absorb the ambient energy, overloading in controlled bursts that sent EMP waves pulsing outward. Zephyrian systems flickered and died. "Tactical, give me a firing solution on their flagship," Blake ordered. Cho shook his head. "We don't have the range, sir, not with these guns." "Then we make our own range." Blake turned to the helmsman. "Take us in close, real close." The Stormbringer dove, weaving through the nebula's currents like a predator. The Zephyrian flagship loomed ahead, its pristine hull gleaming. Now Cho, full power to forward shields, ramming speed. The Stormbringer's nose glowed white, hot as it plowed into the flagship's flank. The impact wasn't enough to destroy it, but it was enough to send the massive vessel spinning into the path of its own support ships. 3 more Zephyrian cruisers vanished in the ensuing collision. Silence fell across the observation deck. The Ceralex officer's glow had dimmed to a stunned grey. Krell's mandibles hung slack. On the Stormbringer, the crew erupted into cheers. Blake allowed himself a small smile before opening a channel to the remaining Zephyrian forces. "Surrender now, or we'll keep improvising." The Zephyrian commander's reply was a staticky growl. This is cheating." Blake chuckled. "No, this is humanity." The simulation ended abruptly, the holographic stars winking out. The arena lights brightened, revealing the stunned faces of the alien observers. Blake strode onto the observation deck, his boots clicking against the polished floor. Krell rounded on him, his chitinous plates vibrating with fury. "You ignored every approved tactic. You violated the exercise parameters." Blake crossed his arms. "You wanted to see how humans fight. Well, now you know." A murmur rippled through the crowd. A Ceralex officer, his voice barely above a whisper, turned to his companion. "They let us underestimate them." Blake heard it. He grinned. "Damn right we did." The observation deck fell silent as the holographic battle unfolded. Alien tacticians leaned forward, their appendages frozen mid-gesture. On the simulated battlefield, human ships weren't following the script. Captain Ryan Blake's voice crackled over the comms. "All units, execute pattern Sigma." The USN Defiance's engines flared crimson as it banked sharply straight toward an asteroid field. Federation observers gasped. The approved battle plan had specifically forbidden entering the debris zone. "What is he doing?" hissed a Zephyrian admiral, his scales darkening with alarm. Inside the Defiance's bridge, Blake's fingers danced across his console. "Helm full burn on my mark. Engineering, divert all non-essential power to forward shields." His XO commander Lee didn't hesitate. "Diverting now, sir. They'll call this mutiny." Blake grinned. "Only if we lose." The Defiance plunged into the asteroid field, its reinforced shield scraping against jagged rocks. The pursuing Zephyrian squadron hesitated, their tactical computers screaming warnings about the suicidal maneuver. Then, the human fleet did something impossible. "Mark!" Blake shouted. 12 Terran corvettes fired simultaneously, not at the enemy, but at carefully calculated points in the asteroid field. Kinetic rounds shattered pre-scanned weak points, sending a cascade of debris spiraling toward the Zephyrian formation. "By the void," a Seralex observer telepathically broadcast to the entire deck. "They're weaponizing the environment." The Defiance emerged from the far side of the field, its hull scorched but intact. Behind it, half the Zephyrian fleet floundered, their pristine formations broken by the unexpected debris storm. On the observation deck, High Strategist Krell's bioluminescence flickered violently. "This violates every doctrine. No civilized species fights like..." His protest died as new alerts blared. The remaining human ships had vanished from sensors. "Where did they go?" demanded a Vorak tactician, frantically recalibrating his scanners. "Nebula radiation." Blake had ordered his fleet to disperse into the very energy clouds the Federation had deemed navigational hazards. Now human vessels emerged at point-blank range, their weapons already charged. "Fire at will," Blake said calmly. Plasma lances tore through the Zephyrian flagship's unshielded engines. 3 more capital ships detonated as human torpedoes found their reactors. The simulated battlefield flashed crimson with kill confirmations. In the observation deck, the Seralex contingent psychic hum became a discordant shriek of disbelief. Their species had mastered fleet telepathy over millennia, yet these humans had just demonstrated coordination beyond anything in their databases. A junior Zephyrian officer whispered what everyone was thinking. "They're not just breaking the rules, they're rewriting them." Meanwhile, aboard the Defiance, Blake studied the tactical feed. His fleet had lost only 2 ships, both sacrificial decoys, that had drawn enemy fire at critical moments. "Sir," Lee said, eyes wide, "we just annihilated a force 3 times our size." Blake leaned back, tapping his console. "Send the after-action report to command. Full sensor logs, especially the part where Krell's restrictions got his fleet wiped out." On the observation deck, reality set in. The holographic display flashed "Simulation terminated" in glaring Federation script. Beneath it, the kill ratio burned brighter than any star. Human fleet, Phalos's, Zephyrian fleet. Phalos's, Krell's mandibles clicked furiously. This was supposed to be a training exercise. Humans don't have the discipline for. A new voice cut through the chaos. Commander Elias Vance, standing at the rear of the deck, arms crossed. "Funny. Looks like we have exactly the discipline needed to win." The Seralex delegation's orbs pulsed with dawning realization. Their telepathic network buzzed with a single terrifying conclusion. Humanity hadn't been constrained by the restrictions. They'd been studying them, learning every weakness in Federation doctrine. As the alien officers erupted into arguments, a single transmission echoed from the Defiance's bridge across all channels. Blake's voice, calm as deep space. "Lesson 1, never tell a human something can't be done." The observation deck's main display flickered, then switched to a live feed from Earth's lunar shipyards. Rows of new warships, their designs unlike anything in the Federation databases, gleamed under construction lights. Vance smiled. "You restricted our ships, not our ingenuity." Silence fell heavier than a black hole's pull. The aliens finally understood. This hadn't been a test of human limitations. It had been a demonstration. The holographic displays in the Galactic Council chamber flickered erratically as the data feeds struggled to keep up with the unfolding disaster. Alien delegates shouted over each other in a dozen different languages, their bioluminescent patterns flashing with alarm. At the center of the storm, Earth Ambassador Lisa Hayes stood motionless, her hands clasped behind her back as the chaos swirled around her. High Strategist Krell's carapace plates rattled as he slammed 3 of his clawed limbs against the podium. "This is unacceptable." The Vorax voice modulator crackled with barely contained fury. "Humanity has violated every protocol of civilized warfare. That simulation was designed to test discipline, not this madness." A Zephyrian admiral's tendrils quivered as he accessed the battle records. "They used nebula radiation as a weapon. That is impossible. No species has ever adapted." Hayes interrupted, her voice cutting through the din. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "Is that what surprises you? That humans can turn their environment into an advantage?" Krell's mandibles twitched. "You were given restrictions for a reason. Your kind lacks the restraint for proper warfare. Look at this." A hologram zoomed in on Captain Blake's flagship, using a dying frigate as a kinetic shield. "This is barbarism." Hayes allowed herself a small smile. "That is innovation. You restricted our ships, not our minds." The Seralex ambassador floated forward, its glowing orbs pulsing with agitation. "You deliberately misled the Federation. Your species pretended to be incompetent for decades." "Not incompetent," Hayes corrected. "Patient." She tapped her wrist display, and a new set of records appeared above the council floor. Every major engagement since first contact, every accidental victory, every time we barely scraped by against superior forces. The holograms showed human ships surviving impossible odds, always by the skin of their teeth. You were so busy laughing at our supposed failures, you never noticed the pattern. Krell's claws scraped against the alloy floor. "This proves nothing except human deceit." "It proves," Hayes said calmly, "that while you were busy writing rules for warfare, we were studying how to break them." She turned to address the entire chamber. "You wanted to see what humans could do with restrictions. Fine. But understand this, every limit you place on us just becomes another variable in our equations." The chamber erupted again, this time with delegates demanding explanations from their own military advisors. A panicked Melaran ambassador projected a star map showing human fleet movements across 3 sectors. "They've been positioning ships like this for months. This isn't reaction. This is preparation." Hayes didn't deny it. "Earth Command anticipated your reaction to today's exercise. Those ships are there because we knew you'd try to enforce harsher sanctions after seeing what we're truly capable of." Krell's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "You overplay your hand, human. The Federation will." The emergency alert klaxon drowned out his threat. The chamber's primary display flickered to life, showing a harried Vorak fleet commander. "High strategist." Unknown contacts emerging from the beta Fane anomaly. Initial scans match. They matched the Devourer archives. The blood drained from Krell's faceplates. Every species in the chamber knew the legends, the ancient scourge that had nearly wiped out galactic civilization 10,000 years before. The Seralex ambassador's orbs dimmed in horror. They were supposed to be extinct. Hayes didn't look surprised. She tapped her earpiece. "Defiance Actual, this is Hayes. Execute Contingency Zulu." She turned back to the stunned council. "You wanted to see unrestricted human warfare? Congratulations. Class is in session." Alarms blared across the chamber as tactical displays showed the Devourer fleet, hundreds of nightmarish organic warships, each larger than a Federation dreadnought. The Zephyrian admiral's tendrils went limp. "Our fleets, our formations, they're useless against that." Hayes was already walking toward the exit. "Then it is a good thing we ignored your battle plans." At the door, she paused and looked back. "One last lesson. You called our tactics unpredictable. We call them winning." As the chamber dissolved into panic behind her, Hayes allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. The aliens had spent centuries trying to box humanity in with rules and restrictions. Today, they would learn what happened when the cage door opened. The alarms screamed through the USN Defiance like a living thing. Captain Ryan Blake gripped the armrests of his command chair as the bridge lights flickered to combat red. Across the holographic display, the unidentified fleet emerged from dark space, a writhing mass of organic-looking ships, their hulls pulsing with sickly violet bioluminescence. "Report," Blake snapped. Lieutenant Mara Cole's fingers flew across her console. Sensors confirm ancient Devourer signatures, the same bastards who nearly wiped out the Federation 3 millennia ago. Her voice didn't shake, but her knuckles whitened. "Their lead ship is, sir. It is bigger than Cententrum's orbital ring." On the main screen, the Devourer fleet unfolded like a nightmare tendril, like destroyers coiled around colossal motherships, their gaping maws lined with plasma spines. The Defiance's AI calculated the numbers: 3,000 enemy vessels against the Federation's 800. Across the comms, panic erupted. Zephyrian commanders shrieked orders in their clicking tongue. A Seralex admiral's telepathic scream echoed through every neural link. "Fall back, form defensive." Then the Devourers struck. A mothership vomited a swarm of fighter drones. They moved wrong, jerking through space like broken puppets, yet accelerating faster than any Federation ship. A Vorak cruiser evaporated under their combined fire, its proud golden hull dissolving into molten slag. Blake watched the carnage unfold. The Federation fleet was crumbling, their neat formations, their pre-approved tactics, useless against an enemy that fought like a hurricane. "Captain," Cole shouted, "Earth Command is hailing us. Priority override." Admiral Lisa Hayes's face appeared on screen, her expression granite. "Blake, the Council just ordered full retreat." Blake's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, Admiral, retreating just means we die tired." Hayes almost smiled. "Good thing I didn't relay that order. Then Earth Command has alternative instructions." A data packet flashed to Blake's terminal. He opened it and froze. It was a single sentence: "Do what humans do best." Across the bridge, his crew waited. Cole's fingers hovered over navigation. Weapons Officer Chen had both hands on the firing controls. They'd all seen the same file. Blake took a breath. "Helm, plot a course straight down that mothership's throat. Chen, divert all power to forward shields. We're going kinetic." No one questioned it. The Defiance's engines roared as she pivoted, her nose aimed at the largest Devourer vessel. Around them, other human ships did the same. USN Valor, reckoning Titan's fist, breaking formation in perfect, silent unison. The alien fleets noticed. Vorak command ships blared warnings. Seralex telepaths shrieked. Madness. Then the Defiance jumped to FTL for a split second. The universe held its breath. The massive Devourer mothership loomed ahead, its gaping maw wide enough to swallow planets. Blake's last thought before impact was a grim smile. The collision lit up the nebula. The Defiant struck at Fei light speed, her reinforced prow punching through the mothership's outer hide like a bullet through rotten fruit. The kinetic energy alone vaporized half the beast's bulk, sending shockwaves through the rest of the Devourer fleet. Then the Valor hit. Then the reckoning. One by one, human ships became living missiles. They didn't just fight the Devourers, they broke them. A Zephyrian admiral later described it as watching predators realize they'd bitten into poison. On the Defiance's shattered bridge, Blake coughed blood. Half the consoles were dead. Cole dragged herself upright, one arm dangling uselessly. "Sir, we're getting signals. The Devourers, they're retreating." Outside, the remaining human ships, battered, burning, but unbeaten, floated amidst the wreckage. The Devourer swarm was in full route, their once mighty fleet reduced to fleeing scraps. A final transmission crackled through, High Strategist Krell's voice, stripped of its usual arrogance. You sacrificed your own ships." Blake grinned through the pain. "Nah, we redecorated. You're welcome." The bridge crew's laughter mixed with the sound of distant explosions. Somewhere in the chaos, A Ceralex officer whispered the truth. The Federation would never forget. They weren't reckless, they were waiting. The wreckage of battle glowed in the void like a shattered constellation. The Devourer swarm, once an unstoppable tide of destruction, now drifted in broken pieces between the stars. Human ships, battered, scorched, but still flying, floated amidst the debris. Their running lights blinking defiantly in the dark, on the observation deck of the USN Defiance. Captain Ryan Blake wiped blood from his temple. The bridge around him was a mess of sparking consoles and injured crew, but the ship still answered his commands. Across the ruined battlefield, the remnants of the Galactic Federation fleet hung motionless, their commanders too stunned to speak. A hologram flickered to life in the center of the bridge. High Strategist Krell's image materialized, his bioluminescent patterns dull with shock. Behind him, the Galactic Council chamber was in chaos, delegates shouting over each other in a dozen languages. How? Krell's mandibles trembled. The Devourers were unstoppable. Their ships outmassed ours 10-1 their weapons. Blake grinned, wincing as the motion pulled at the gash on his face. Yeah, and now they're scrap. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the tactical display. You spent centuries perfecting your doctrines, your rules, your restrictions. But the Devourers didn't play by your rules. So neither did we. On the view screen, the wreckage of a Devourer mothership tumbled past, its blackened hull torn open by a kamikaze strike from the Defiance's sister ship, the Valiant. The crew had rigged their FTL drive to overload on impact, turning their own vessel into a relativistic bomb. Lieutenant Mara Cole, her uniform sleeve torn and one eye swollen shut, tapped at her console. Final tally coming in, Captain. 73% of the Devourer fleet destroyed. The rest are in full retreat. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. 73% against an enemy that had crushed every civilization it had ever encountered. Krell's voice was barely a whisper. You sacrificed your own ships. Blake's grin faded. We did what we had to. You called us reckless, unpredictable. Well, guess what? That is why we won. Across the galaxy, the news feeds were exploding. The footage of human ships ramming into Devourer vessels at FTL speeds played on loop. The Ceralex analysts who had mocked human tactics were now scrambling to decode them. The Zepyrian tacticians who had laughed at human recklessness sat in stunned silence. In the council chamber, Ambassador Lisa Hayes stood calmly as the arguments raged around her. When the noise finally died down, she spoke a single sentence. The vote, councillors. There was no debate, no discussion. The decision was unanimous. Human restrictions were lifted. Permanently back on the Defiance, Blake slumped into his chair as the adrenaline faded. The bridge crew moved around him, tending to the wounded, assessing the damage. Cole limped over, handing him a stim. Patch. Think they'll finally stop underestimating us? She asked, nodding toward the holographic feed of the council chamber. Blake pressed the patch to his neck, feeling the sharp sting of the nanites. Doubt it, but next time, he glanced at the view screen, where the last of the Devourer wreckage spun lazily against the stars. Next time, they won't make the mistake of holding us back. And as the human fleet regrouped, as the alien commanders stared at the battle data in disbelief, one truth echoed through the galaxy. The Federation had feared what humans might do if left unchecked. Now they knew, and for the first time in galactic history, the aliens were afraid, not of humanity's limits, but of what happened when they had none.